instead of hitting home runs, sometimes we're going to hit singles. But they're really important singles.
Meet Ichiro Obama, the
3, 2,
singles hitter headed
1.
to Japan.
Well, we have hope, we have change, but we don't have extra bases, except if you're here on Top Line. Top Line starts right now.
Hello and welcome to ABC News Top Line. I'm Rick Klein.
And I'm Amy Walter.
Every day at noon Eastern, right here bringing you the latest in politics, everything you need to know about what's going on in our crazy world. It's twitter.com/Rick Klein, twitter.com/Amy E. Walter for even more throughout the day. Tell us what's going on today.
All right, I'm going to start off with read his lips. This is the president overseas. We saw him in Korea. He's in Japan now. He drew a not so subtle line in the sand, it seems, on taxes. Listen to this one.
I continue to believe that extending permanently the upper income tax cuts would be a mistake and that we can't afford it.
So extending permanently,
I think, is the key word there.
Yes.
I think technically this is a redrawn line in the sand because we've heard lines in the sands around the tax cuts for $250,000 plus. Now the different line is permanent extension is what he's not going to do. Obviously room for compromise with the Republicans in Congress over these next couple weeks.
That's right.
Next up today, steel cage match. We have a challenger for RNC Chairman Michael Steele. You've heard of him before if you follow politics. Saul Nuzis, who's the former chairman of the Michigan Republican Party. He ran against Michael Steele unsuccessfully 2 years ago. He threw his hat in the ring today. He put a blog posting out there and said essentially, you know what Michael Steele's leadership style is. Enough said. Nothing else has to be said about that. And of course, RNC members do know that. The thing will be to try to appeal to them and peel off enough votes to challenge him.
Well, and there are a lot of Republicans right now, though, who do believe that Michael Steele still can win. Remember, he has a solid base of support. It takes a majority to win the chairmanship. The real concern, as Saul pointed out, is about fundraising. It's money, money, money for 2012. All right, all over but the counting up in Juneau, Alaska. We had Joe Miller here, of course, the other day, but it looks as if Lisa Murkowski continues to rack up the write-in ballots. The Alaska Division of Elections saying they've reviewed write-in ballots for almost half the precincts now in Alaska. There is a 98% rate of return for Lisa Murkowski. If Miller is to win, he needs that to be more like 80% or so. He needs to peel off about 10 or 12%.
They're not even finding enough ballots to challenge, really. So many people are spelling Lisa Murkowski clearly and legibly.
And now they're debating about whether an L that was too cursive-y was really not correct.
Doesn't look good so far for Joe Miller as they continue to count. And finally today, McCain versus McCain. No secret that Cindy McCain has different views on gay rights than John McCain. But check this out. This is from a new ad that is up trying to urge lawmakers to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Our political and religious leaders tell LGBT youth that they have no future.
Wow, if only Cindy McCain knew any political leaders who had any power.
Could have an influence on about Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Yeah, can't think of anyone there. Maybe some tensions in the McCain household over that one. A fun one to follow. We begin today's program with Congressman Paul Kanjorski, a Democrat of Pennsylvania who was among the fallen last week. Our condolences over the election results, first off. But I want to ask you, you lost to the same Republican you had beaten 2 times earlier. What was different this time around?
Well, I don't know. You can't come up with a final conclusion other than the fact that I think there was a wave across the country of about 5%, and everybody seemed to suffer that deficiency, and certainly I did. And that was a distinguishing vote.
Well, what drove the wave?
Yeah.
Well, I think very clearly that the Obama administration and the leadership in Congress, although were very effective in legislating, they were terrible in educating. And in order to be successful, you have to be able to educate. If the electorate doesn't know what you did or what the legislation passed accomplished, then for all intents and purposes you accomplished nothing. And that was most apparent on the Health Act. Few
people didn't feel like they knew what it was.
They didn't know what it was, and change caused fear, and there wasn't that built-up reservoir of trust, so we went down.
Well, so given that it's about messaging, is it the right message for Democrats to send to put the same team in place in the House? Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer look like they are going to be part of the leadership. Should there be new folks in charge?
Well, it's an open question. I suspect it depends whether or not you're planning on just preparing for 2012 or you're planning on rebuilding the party. as it may be. Presently, we've lost most of the moderate wing of the Democratic Party in elective office, and that's something that should be replaced if we're going to win national standing again as a party. So it would probably, from a rebuilding aspect, long-term, be better to put new leadership in place. On the other hand, the leadership of the House is not going to be a significant player in what happens over the next 2 years. It's going to be the president and the Republican leadership of the House, and then the Democratic leadership in the Senate.
But if you were still there, would you be supporting Pelosi?
If I were still there, Nancy Pelosi would probably have a majority, and I'd
Well, that's
be
a
supporting
good question.
That's a very good point.
About the rebuilding, what does the party have to do? I mean, you've seen this. You've been involved in politics. You've been representing your district in Congress for 26 years now. What has to happen for the party to begin to appeal again to the kinds of voters that you would need in districts like yours?
Well, I think they have to decide whether or not this was a structural change of substance, or whether it was a mistake, lack of understanding by the electorate, or just a responsive election. And it could very easily be that. For instance, I think some of the key elements here could be the tax bill. I would suspect most Democrats agreed with the president when he campaigned against allowing tax reductions for millionaires and billionaires. He took that very seriously. I certainly did. As a matter of fact, I could declare today, I can't think any way in the world that they would get me convinced to vote for the continuation of the tax cut, whether it be temporary or permanent.
Any continuation of the upper income tax.
Of the upper income tax.
Whether it's temporary, whether it's
Right.
What if they change the amount? You said if it's not 250, it's $1 million, or it's 450.
I just don't believe when you're borrowing trillions of dollars from all over the world, you can afford to give an additional $700 billion tax cut to people who don't presently need it. And quite frankly, I didn't vote for the tax cuts when they were originally brought up by the Bush administration back in 01 and 02, so there'd be no reason for me to support, so that's not a significant change. But I can't see the president convincing those members of Congress that have now paid the ultimate price. They've lost their seats as a result of some failure. It's no individual that was responsible, but I can't see us changing our position. I'd rather see the Democratic Party stand firm on honest, real principles and say, okay, we lost this election. We've got to go back and educate the electorate as to what happened or why, but then stand by principle and stay with the same position, particularly on the tax issue.
So even if that means that the taxes go up for everybody, including the middle class,
well,
that seems to be the alternative. They expire.
You just have to concede taxes are going to have to go up. I mean, I want to return to the Clinton era where we had a balanced budget, and if we roll the tax forgiveness back to the days of the Clinton, it's not huge. It's 2 to 4%. That's not a huge amount of money. That gets us much closer to getting to a balanced budget atmosphere. And that we should do. I just think that's responsible government. I don't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat.
Right.
And we should require that.
So just to be clear, what you're saying is you'd rather have them all expire and have no tax cuts for anybody rather than concede on or compromise on the higher income tax cut.
Absolutely. I think the argument that we're not going to make them permanent, year to year, everything is permanent. The Congress can change at any time, so there's nothing like temporary or permanency. And the reality is, that if we were to lose the presidential election, there's no way in the world the Congress would reduce those taxes in the future.
Right.
So it would put us on a course for a $25 trillion debt.
Right. We saw the Deficit Commission out with these recommendations this week. I want to ask you one question about financial services. You're a senior member of that committee. What is your fear? What is your concern is going to happen to the big reform that you passed just a few months ago with Republicans in control?
Well, the reason that I ran really was to implement the changes made in the financial regulatory reform, and particularly my amendment, too big to fail. I think we need the regulators to judge whether there are institutions that are too big, too interconnected, et cetera, to put the system at systemic risk, identify those institutions, and then apply that amendment in law to make the change. What I'm looking for is a Theodore Roosevelt trust buster moment, if you will. That's what we need. Once we do that and establish the definition, most financial institutions will fall in line and will put us less at risk in the future. But I think that if they can't change it, I don't see their capacity to change the reform movement. They'll let it atrophy. And that's unfortunate, because I was chairman of the Capital Markets Committee. I would have been capable of having constant hearings every 2 months to make sure the regulators were implementing the law.
The implementation being so important there. All right, Congressman Paul Kanjorski, Democrat of Pennsylvania, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate
Thank
you
you
being
very
with us.
much.